Thank you both for joining me today. Dr. Schaff, you're a doctor and you have a degree in English. How do you mix art and medicine, and how did that influence you to become the director of HEAL?
Great question. It goes back a long ways. I have a lifelong love of reading. When I went to college, I decided to go as a pre-med English major because I knew I wanted to be a doctor, but I loved literature. And that was in the days when that wasn't a wise choice, according to many of my advisors, because they said I would not have the necessary science background I'd need to do well on, the MCAT or what have you. And I loved my studies in English. I love science, and I the science prerequisites were essential for my medical school applications. But I did get into medical school. I went to, despite what my advisors had said, I went to Mount Sinai in New York and did pediatric training after that, and came back to Los Angeles for that at Children's Hospital Los Angeles, and then went into practice shortly thereafter. One of my teachers from Children's Hospital, where I trained, invited me to teach in the USC's Introduction to Clinical Medicine program. So in 1986, I became voluntary faculty, and I took a group of 6 students through their early clinical skills education. So the doctor-patient relationship was what that course was about. And I loved it. I just sort of fell in love with teaching and the program. I thought USC was so ahead of its time to put students at the bedside of patients from their earliest days in med school. Most programs at the time, students didn't see patients until their 3rd and 4th years. They were in the classroom for the first 2 years. I like to say that after many years of my voluntary teaching, they made me an offer I couldn't refuse and asked me to direct that program. So in 1996, I became full-time faculty at USC. As director, I thought it was important for me to go to national conferences and to learn more about education, medical education, and the courses I was teaching. And so I went to a conference on spirituality and health. And the keynote speaker was Rita Sharon, who was an internist at Columbia. And when she was introduced as a doctor, but also as someone who was about to defend her dissertation in English literature, Henry James scholar. I heard her speak, and I just thought, oh my gosh, this is what I have always wanted to do. I understood why I was a pre-med English major back in the day, that the love of human stories was what powered both my interest in medicine and in literature. And so I began speaking with her. She became a very good mentor, colleague, friend. And I said, should I go to grad school? Should I do this too? And she said, oh, it's really fun. You should do it. So I did. I began my PhD journey. I don't want to tell you how long ago, but yesterday I was hooded. I finished my,
oh, wow.
I defended in 2019, but because of the pandemic, the ceremony for the past 3 years took place yesterday. So I got to do that, which was fantastic.
Congratulations.
Thank you. HEAL stands for Humanities, Ethics, Art, and Law. And my colleagues were an internist and a professor of law who in the 1980s founded the HEAL program. And at the medical school, he was one of them, Alex Capron, is a professor of medicine and law, and David Goldstein, who unfortunately died a few years ago, was a medical doctor and professor of medicine. And they believed, as do I, it makes perfect sense to me, that in order to be a good clinician, you have to have a grounding in the humanities. There are ways of knowing, ways of understanding, ways of interpreting that you can't learn in a science textbook.
And so how did you and Ted come to work together, and what transformations happened during the HEAL program's process at that time?
The HEAL program had always been a part of our core curriculum. So all medical students at USC participated. It was required, and it happened throughout. It was integrated in other courses. So it wasn't like, okay, here's where you do the humanities, here's where you do the science. It was in the Introduction to Clinical Medicine program, for instance, that I mentioned. But it was not a huge piece of their education, but it was an integral part. And in 2016, is that right, Ted? Do I have the right year?
Correct.
I finally got it. In 2016, I had been hearing about TED. Several people had tried to get us together. I was a incredibly busy person trying to be, I think I was curriculum dean at the time.
Yep.
We had a new dean who at the right moment asked me a question. He said, what would you do? What would you like to do to enhance the program? And I said, well, ideally, for instance, I'd love to have an artist in residence. There's someone in our community who could serve that role. And he asked me, well, what would that cost? And I told him, and he said, well, I'll pay for that. And I thought, wow, that's impressive. I had just met the man. So with that funding, we hired Ted. And then a couple of years later, we got some significant philanthropic funding that allowed us to continue. And then we've also applied with the help of our colleagues here for other foundation funding, and that's enabled us to grow the program even further. Ted's part of the program in particular.
And Ted, how did your involvement really start with the program, and where have you brought it to today?
Dr. Schaff can talk about this. There was a gallery in the building, but it wasn't being used as part of the educational curriculum. So she brought me down to the gallery and sort of figured out a way we could stage a coup and take the gallery over and tie it to the core curriculum. Over time, it's grown and we've changed the format of the talk. So now there's the artist, but we also pair the artist with a specialist in the field that the artist is working in. I should say patient artists, because they're all patients that have illnesses that tie to the core curriculum, which is broken up into the body systems. And they all do work about the illness. We don't have somebody with heart disease who does landscapes. We have someone with heart disease who does work about having heart disease. So now we pair them together, and it's grown so much that we had to move out of the gallery because the fire department told us we had too many people. And we're now doing and streaming these talks live from the main auditorium.
This piece of it, the art and medicine portion of our HEAL offerings now, we consider part of what we call our co-curriculum. So these are not required events for the students, but as Ted mentioned, they're very well attended by students, faculty, and staff. We invite the whole community. The way our curriculum is organized, in the first year and a half of the curriculum, students are studying foundations of medical science and the organ system. So when they're studying the respiratory system or the cardiovascular system, that's what Ted's talking about when he says we align those shows with that portion of the curriculum. So each show is up for, we'd like to have it up a little bit before through the end of the organ system that is under study. And they're learning about patients' experiences that they're not going to learn in a textbook, and they're not really going to even learn it necessarily from their work and introduction to clinical medicine when they go and speak with the patient, because what they're seeing is a visual representation. They're hearing the patient's words, but they're also seeing their art, and they're seeing it in a way that really gives them, I think, an appreciation of the patient's lived experience.
And what is the perspective that you hope all of the students take away from the program?
The best way I can say it is really the perspective of what it's like for patients who live with this illness or condition or a situation.
Dr. Schaff has heard me say this a million times at every talk, but all the art we show, if these people were healthy, would never have been created. There would have been other art. It might have been just as good, but it would have been, a landscape, a portrait or something, instead of some sort of gut-wrenching internal struggle these people are having. And as an artist who was sick as a child, I really want the med students to understand that not everything that goes along with illness when they're dealing with their patients is negative. There's a lot of creativity that happens because of illness.
The Artist and Researcher group show is approaching this summer. Would you be able to share some about the curation and creation of this show?
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that, because I'd like to always commend Ted on what I think is, stroke of genius to come up with this idea. But this was something he pitched, I think, the first year he came, which was to honor really the work of the biomedical scientists. In particular, we expanded it a little bit to include other types of research, but his idea was to pair a researcher with an artist, have them have a conversation. Artists could visit the scientist's lab or place of, where they do their research, and really understand through conversation and through observation what they do, and to represent it in their art, and then have a show that represented these collaborations. So in addition to the artwork is a statement from the scientist about their work, and it's always an eclectic, colorful, gorgeous, exciting, thrilling show. Really, I'm always surprised and always just sort of knocked out by what happens there. That is an annual event now, halted for the 2 years of the pandemic, but back in action on June 1.
So Eric, you did the artist, you're one of our artists and researcher artists this year. How was the experience for you to work with a researcher and do work about medical science?
It's been a great experience so far. I also have a background in medical research. I worked at Baylor College of Medicine in Houston for a couple years. So now I get to almost be on the other side of it and really just listen to the research and make something specific to that. So it's nice to have a very creative outlet, I think, for the research. What are some other programs that have been created through HEAL?
We've had life drawing classes and regular drawing classes, painting classes. We had one yesterday, actually. And the number of students that have already a pretty well-rounded arts background has always amazed me. The life drawing classes, I thought, we're going to get a lot of stick figures and these people haven't drawn before. And a good number of them had already had a lot of training, taken life drawing.
In addition, we have a lunch and learn series. So probably 5 or 6 times during the year, we invite scholars from other disciplines in the arts, humanities, social sciences, theater, and they are able to, again, just inform the students' ways of understanding outside of their scientific discipline. As part of our co-curricular programming, we've had a musician in residence who has offered piano lessons to students and has helped the Keck Music Society students put on their concerts over the years. The music, the art, the lecture series. So many of our students tell us that they haven't gotten to think this way since they got to med school. They haven't gotten to do art or music, and they're just thrilled to be able to continue doing that. And these are things that aren't required. So it's really something that they do just because they want to do it.
Yeah, it's nice to tie art back into medicine, as historically it was so interconnected, and now you're able to rejoin those things.
We're trying.
So one last question, really quick. How will the program continue to evolve?
The medical school curriculum is in a process of renewal right now. So this is the first year of a major revision in the curriculum. There are some new things in the curriculum, some narrative medicine portions of the curriculum that didn't used to be there. And as far as our co-curricular activities, I think, the opportunity to grow whatever we can, to sustain and make it bigger and better where we can, as long as it's, quality. Ted hopes to make a movie film about the HEAL program, the history of the HEAL program. I think one of the things we haven't done as well as we could, just because we're so, immersed in the work of doing the work, the education and all of it, is that we haven't gotten the word out as well as we could have. My first goal, you're making me think, is just to make sure we get back to the kinds of in-person events that have such an energy, and then to just continue to do what we can to enhance the experience of our students and make them remember, who they are as humans, who their patients are as humans.
Ted, do you have any vision for the future yet?
Well, the only thing, and Dr. Schaff and I have talked about this and we're working on it now, is trying to tour some of these shows. We've been talking to other medical groups and schools in the LA area, and I'm talking to some other places about maybe just taking the whole shows and moving them, and then restaging the conversation, maybe with a doctor of that specialty from another school or another organization or something. We put in a lot of effort to do these shows. We'd like to make sure they get seen by more people. That's the main thing.
Thank you both so much for your time today. I really appreciate being able to speak to you about this.
Well, thank you so much.
Thanks for talking to us. And if you need any other info, don't hesitate to reach out.